Hey there. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kendra Perry, and if this is your first time signing in for one of my live videos, I'm a functional nutritionist. I specialize in female hormones and chronic GI disorders. I also know a lot about detoxification and minerals, so I talk a lot about that as well. And today, I actually want to chat about hormone testing because, currently a lot of women have hormone imbalance. In fact, about 80% of women struggle with a female hormone imbalance, but unfortunately, blood testing is really ineffective, is not a good way to detect hormone imbalance. So as a result, women get told that everything is normal. So if you're here with me live, if you've had this experience, just, type yes in the comments box. Tell me, have you gone to the doctor with a symptom because you think something is wrong and they tell you that your lab work looks normal, that everything is fine, and you leave feeling extremely frustrated because you don't feel fine. You don't feel good. I really, really understand how frustrating that is. So we're going to talk about why that is, why most hormone testing that your doctor is going to run is ineffective, and why it isn't the best way to show you if you do in fact have hormone imbalance. So if you guys are live with me now, or if you're watching the replay, I do have a free hormone imbalance self-test. And if you want to receive that, you can just type test into the comments box and I'll actually send it to your Facebook Messenger. So yeah, just throw that, the word test in the comments box, and then you'll receive the free self-test. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about hormone testing. And when you go to the doctor, what is typically going to happen? Well, they're going to order up a bunch of blood work. And then, like I mentioned before, the most typical thing that happens is that everything comes back as normal. And you're like, okay, but I'm pretty sure I have hormone issues, especially if you're getting symptoms with your monthly cycle, like cramping, fatigue, insomnia, bloating, irritability, just being super, super emotional. That's a pretty good sign that something's up with your symptoms. So it might be really confusing to you, well, why are my lab tests normal? And so this is actually a huge issue with blood testing. So hormones that are in the blood are in transit. So they're not actually usable to the cell because they're actually bound to transport carrier proteins. Okay. So they are not usable, and we have no idea. Hi, Sarah, welcome. So we have no idea with blood testing if those hormones are actually available to be used by the cell, or if they're just being transported to the detox organs to be excreted from the body. We have no idea. So that's the issue with blood testing, is we don't actually know if those hormones are normal. So just because you have normal hormone levels in the blood doesn't actually mean that your hormone levels are normal. It just means that your body might be transporting a lot of different hormones at that time. So not very effective. So if we want to know if you actually have hormone imbalance, we need to know what availability of hormones your cell has. We want to know what the hormone levels are in the cell, and you cannot tell that with blood testing. So if you are someone who is taking bioidentical hormones and your doctor or naturopath is using blood testing as a way to track whether you need that hormone or not, that's actually not effective. And that's a big reason why when I run other types of testing that I see hormone levels completely through the roof, because this woman has been taking bioidentical or even synthetic hormones and they didn't actually need them because the hormone levels are actually normal at a cellular level. So I want to talk a little bit today about the best type of hormone testing that you should do. If you want to know, do you have a hormone imbalance? Do you want to know the status of your hormones? And when I say hormones, I'm talking about your sex hormones, so things like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, or even things like cortisol. And melatonin. So not really, blood testing isn't the best way to test for these hormones because of the reasons I just mentioned. So with estrogen and progesterone, we don't know if the body actually has them available to use. And in the case of cortisol, blood is probably the worst test for cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone, and when you are stressed, cortisol will rise. And I think the very nature of getting a blood draw, even if you're not freaked out by getting your blood drawn, I think that's enough to spike cortisol because, we're kind of we're anticipating getting this like prick by this needle, and that is enough to actually stimulate your cortisol. So therefore we're getting a false reading. We're getting a more elevated level of cortisol than what is actually normal if you were completely at rest, not getting stabbed with a needle by the nurse practitioner, right? So let's talk about the best type of testing for hormones. So blood is the worst. The next best is actually saliva testing. So saliva is really a great way to test hormones. It will actually tell you what your cells have available to use. So saliva testing, your doctor is probably not going to run this. You do generally have to pay out of pocket for this, but maybe a naturopath or another functional nutritionist like me would run maybe a saliva hormone test. And so then we can get kind of, those levels of what your cell actually has to use. So we can get a better reading for cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, and we can even get melatonin with saliva hormone testing. But the problem with hormone testing is it's not giving us the full picture. We actually want to know a little bit more than what those free usable hormones are. We actually want to know how they're being broken down and metabolized in the body. And the reason why that is very important because it actually affects how that a hormone is being expressed. So I'm going to use estrogen as an example. Okay, so estrogen, there are two phases of estrogen metabolism or two different sort of processes the body goes through to move estrogen out of the body. There's phase 1 and phase 2. So let's say your estrogen is kind of like middle of the range. So maybe you run a saliva test and you see, your estrogen is mid-range, which might be a bit confusing to you because you have a lot of those estrogen dominant symptoms. So estrogen dominant symptoms would include things like any PMS symptoms, weight gain, irritability, cramping, bloating, heavy periods, irregular periods, getting a lot of clots in your period, fatigue or insomnia leading up to your cycle. Those are really common estrogen dominant symptoms. Maybe you've done a little bit of Google work and you're like, I'm pretty sure I have estrogen dominance. But when you run that saliva panel, your estrogen is actually looking normal on the test. So why is that? That's very confusing. Well, if you were to run a urine hormone testing, you'd actually be able to see those phases of estrogen metabolism or how estrogen is being broken down in the body. And maybe you have really poor phase 1 or phase 2 or even both phase 1 or phase 2 metabolism. So this means that even though your estrogen is normal, it's not getting detoxified or metabolized properly from the body. And that can actually lead to a lot of estrogen dominant symptoms because it's getting clogged up in your system. So there are certain metabolites that a woman may produce that make her way more likely to have estrogen dominant symptoms, even if her estrogen is normal on a test. So we really want to look at that metabolism because if you prefer certain metabolites, it's really likely that you're going to have estrogen dominant symptoms. And there's a lot of stuff you can actually do to improve that metabolism and to improve the rate at which estrogen is excreted from the body, which is going to help your symptoms go down. It's going to help your body detoxify estrogen, and it's going to make things a lot better. And the same goes true for progesterone, testosterone, and even cortisol. We want to see those metabolites. We want to see how they're broken down in the body. And this is why I actually prefer urine hormone testing for hormones. And the test that I use these days is called the Dutch test. It's from Precision Analytical, and it's a very comprehensive test because not only is it looking at all those hormones and metabolites, but they've recently added a whole bunch of different markers. So now with the Dutch test, you can look at what's called the cortisol awakening response. So in a healthy person, the majority of your cortisol is actually produced within about 30 to 45 minutes of waking. So you're supposed to get this really strong kind of spike of cortisol first thing in the morning. And if you don't have that spike, it can tell us a lot about your sleep routine, about your likelihood that you have an infection, about blood sugar imbalances, about your vitality. It can give us a ton of information. And with the new Dutch test, we can actually see that cortisol awakening response. They've also added a whole bunch of different markers in terms of organic acid. So now we can look at B vitamin metabolism, which is very important for energy and also hormone production. We can look at neurotransmitter production. So we can look at things like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, which gives us a really good window into mood. So mental health stuff like depression, anxiety, and especially things like fatigue and insomnia. So we can get a really good indication of that. It now also has a marker for glutathione, which is your body's primary antioxidant. You need it to detoxify. You need it to neutralize free radicals, so we can see where that is at. So with the new Dutch panel, we get all this incredible information. So you're going to get way more than you're going to get from a blood test and way more that you're going to get from a saliva profile. So really, really, really amazing test, and I highly recommend it. If you're interested in running one of those with me, you can book a free appointment with me. We can chat more about it. But something to keep in mind is your insurance is not going to pay for this test, and your doctor is not going to cover the fee of this test. So you do have to pay for it out of pocket. And of course, there is a cost associated with that. So that sucks for some people. You know, some of us have the money to invest in our health, and for the rest of us, maybe we don't have the money right now. So what I've done is I've actually created a free self-test. And if you just type test into the comments box, you should be able, my Facebook Messenger will actually send that to your Facebook Messenger. And it's a test that you can use. It'll take you about 5 minutes to go through, and you can determine if you are at risk for hormone imbalance. So it's a great screening test to tell you if doing something like the Dutch test would actually be beneficial to you, if it would actually help you, really figure out what's going on with your hormones. So just type test in the comments box to receive that, that free self-test. And let me know if you have any questions about the Dutch test or how it can help you with your hormones. Even if you're not joining me live right now, I do come back and I do check all the comments. I love interacting with you. So definitely shoot me a question if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to help. And thanks so much for joining in. I'll probably be going live again on Thursday or Friday to talk about more hormone stuff, one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time.